The Love Life and Lose Weight podcast will teach you the art and science of changing your habits around food. If you know what to do, but can't figure out why you're just not doing it, this is the right podcast for you. I'm your host, advanced certified weight and life coach, Heather Beardsley. I've helped hundreds of women just like you figure out how to think and eat like a normal eater, lose weight, and love life on the journey to goal weight and beyond. Hi, welcome to episode 63. This is called Shrinking the Fuck It / Distracted Cycle. Back on episode 57, I spoke with you all about anti-fragile weight loss. I've got a lot of nice feedback about that concept, framing it in our lives, and understanding the things that happen through our goal setting with weight loss that make our ability to stay attached to our goals and the habits that help us get there less fragile. And this brings us to the topic of what I like to call the fuck it distracted cycle. So, the fuck it distracted cycle happens when life gets a little messy, as we know it does, and starts being more of a disruption where it's harder for you to stay attached to your new habits, and using the tools that I give you for weight loss feels a little bit harder to do. So, this is part of making your weight loss less fragile and breakable, is normalizing the fact that all human beings go through fuck it distracted cycles where life gets messy and takes us off what feels normal. Okay. So, this is about understanding that these will always happen in life, they will always be disruptive, and that when it's very dysregulating, of course, you're not going to be able to reach for practicing new habits. There are windows of tolerance, is what they call it, for our nervous system and our emotions. So take grief as an example. If someone you really love and who's close to you dies, you're going to be operating just on a primal level. Your habit brain is going to take over, and you're not going to have even awareness of like, what am I doing? Is it what I want? Like, you're just going to be coping with what's happened. And the timeline on this is going to vary depending on the circumstance of this phase that you find yourself in. But I'm talking more about just typical disruptive things that can lead you into a situation where you're just noticing you're eating more, you've had a regain, or maybe it's just more obvious, like you are not able to even do your planning every day or anything like that, or maybe your movement has taken a back seat. So you're going to be in this fuck it distracted cycle. And then always at some point, we come back to awareness of like, oh, I'm in this phase right now. Like, this doesn't feel good. And what I see most of my clients do is when they notice they've been in a fuck it distracted cycle because life got messy or what have you, what you typically do is use being in the negative distracted fuck it cycle against yourself as evidence that you're not doing it right. Instead of, what I want you to do is to notice when you're in it, normalize it. Oh, yeah, I knew a fuck it distracted cycle was going to come. We often don't know what the circumstances are that accompany a fuck it distracted cycle. Sometimes it's not always obvious. Sometimes it's very obvious. But when you see that yourself in it, this is an opportunity for you to think about it and your agency, even in this difficult place, differently. And I want you to reach for this idea that actually you can use this as a way to make your weight loss less fragile and decrease its impact on your goals and how you see you as an having agency in your life. So, figuring out how to effectively respond and think about being in fuck it distracted cycles in a way that feels better will make losing weight and getting back to focusing on what works for your goals feel so much easier, and it will help you be more consistent. So, all of us go through this phase to one extent or another, probably several times a year. And so, we need to bake in this idea that life is going to make it hard for me to practice my new habits around food, stay attached to my hunger, even know if I'm eating too enough, or even plan. And this isn't a problem. Why? Because as soon as you notice that you've lost focus and you've had a regain, or you're doing more overeating, you're falling back into old habits, you can practice in that moment making the next best decision to get back to focusing on what does help you and allow what you're able to do in that moment, even if it means jotting down a plan on a piece of paper rather than the worksheet that you always use, and let actually you reaching to write it down on the paper be amazing evidence that you can do the things that you're trying to do. And they don't have to look perfect for you to think that about yourself. We know that it's to be expected that life happens and we will go through these phases where we get distracted and unfocused with our new habits around the lifestyle we're trying to create. The important thing to remember is that going through these phases is never in the way of you getting to your goals. So don't ever make being in one of these phases mean that that's the reason you can't get where you're going. What does get in the way of sustainable weight loss is thinking that because you lost focus, that somehow you can't lose all your weight. And then you indulge in even extending the fuck it cycle. And then you feel bad about what you're doing. And then you question, why am I even doing this? I don't even understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. And then we kind of use the fuck it cycle against ourselves. From now on, I want you to try something different. This is where I want you to focus if this sounds familiar to you. Okay. All you have to do is, like I said, get back to the basics that help you lose weight, planning your food day without restrictive diet mentality. So I see what many of you do when you know that you've been overeating or you've had a gain. The brain offers, well, you should have salads and dry chicken breast and broccoli. Nope, you're not going to do that. That makes it harder than it has to. You're just coming out of a fuck it cycle. So you need to find a way to make reaching for the minimums that help you create positive momentum super easy. So that means planning for the food you actually want to eat and that you've probably been eating. But just saying, I will not eat today until I feel a definite sign of physical hunger. That is such a huge win. And when you see yourself doing that, I want you to make this mean that you're exiting out of the fuck it distracted cycle. And the brain will be like, well, no, you're still eating the same foods you were when you were overeating. It's like, yeah, that's okay. But I'm doing the waiting for hunger part differently. And that's what most matters is I'm getting back to eating from my body cues, listening to my hunger, and figuring out what is physically enough food. I'm not just going unconscious and checking out when I overeat anymore, when I eat. So this is about making the next best decision as soon as you notice you've lost your focus. So 2 examples. Maybe like at 1 p.m., you realize you never made your plan and you haven't made a plan for a couple of weeks. Well, exiting out of the fuck it cycle might look like, you know what? I'm just going to jot down what I was going to have for lunch and dinner. And I'm going to write down what I've already eaten for breakfast. And I'm going to count this as my plan, even though I didn't start in the morning when I typically do. And even though I'm not using the worksheet that I typically use, this is good enough for me to give myself evidence that I'm no longer in the fuck it distracted cycle. Okay, here's another example. Realizing at 11 a.m. you haven't had any water. you haven't been hydrating, or maybe noticing that you haven't worked out. Refocusing looks like maybe just taking a few minutes right then and there to fill up those water bottles, or taking 10 minutes to do your squats and your sit-ups and maybe just walk around the block. No, it wasn't the typical workout that you like to do. It certainly wasn't the amount of time that you typically take to work out. And maybe you're still short of where you'd like to be with your water, but you make drinking the water and doing any movement available to you in that moment your agency to say, no more. I'm out of this. I'm already changing things and making decisions with intention. And when I do that, no matter what it looks like, I make it mean I'm back to attending to myself and being intentional with my food and my food lifestyle and my habits that help me. So you see how this can be really helpful. No matter what's happened before, all you have to do is ask yourself one question. How do I win the moment I'm in now? I want you to give yourself selective amnesia from all that's happened up until this moment. You're kind of like a horse putting blinders on. Why do they do that for horses? So that the horses don't get spooked by what's coming in on the side. They only focus on the path that's ahead of them. And I want you to do that for yourself. The brain is just so naturally judgmental and always looking for threats to your well being. And so it's going to kind of use your past performance against you if it's unsupervised. So you just tell yourself, I'm not interested in what's happened up until this point. If I ever want to exit out of this fuck it distracted cycle, I put my blinders on and I ask myself, like for the past, and I only look forward and I ask myself, how can I win the moment I'm in right now? What is possible given my resources and like my time that I have right now? It may not look perfect, but whatever you're able to do is such a win, especially because you're coming out of a fuck it distracted cycle. So, as long as you practice refocusing, making the next best decision, what you're doing is you're shrinking the fuck it distracted cycle. So, it doesn't take longer and have more of a negative impact on your goals than it has to. So, the less time you take indulging in a fuck it distracted cycle, the more successful you will see yourself being, even when these things happen. And the more consistent you will be with your weight loss. You'll minimize the negative impacts of like your own self regard because you'll see yourself as an agent of change, even when life gets messy. So, you're not going to ask yourself to take action that you're not able to take, but reaching for those small things that you can do, even if it's just going to bed a little bit earlier, let those count and keep track of those points of progress and see yourself as exiting this cycle. Just think about it. Being in a fuck it distracted cycle isn't a real thing. It's nothing we can see, right? This is just a story we're creating in our heads about how we are being and what sense of control we have. So, as soon as you're able to have control, my suggestion is take it, be intentional, take action on purpose. Like, I sometimes I do this with like getting behind on laundry. And when this is a micro cycle of fuck it, like the laundry's piled up and I haven't done it and I have a lot of resistance to it. Sometimes I just, I call it like throw down with myself. And I'm just like, that's it. I'm so tired of my brain telling me that the laundry is piling up and why haven't you done it? And oh, this just feels terrible. When are you going to get your shit together? Blah, blah, blah. I stop exactly what I'm doing and I put a load in the dryer and I make that, or sorry, in the washer. And I make that mean my brain can't talk shit to me anymore because I've taken action to the contrary. And that's all I'm suggesting that you do here. Okay. So, taking any action like this will refocus your judgment of what happened in the past over from feeling shitty and like out of control to feeling good about the actions you're taking now. And I hope that helps. Today, your coach homework, make a list of easy ways to make the next best decision starting as soon as you can. Okay. And then get into action. Find me on Instagram. My handle is at Thrive in Midlife. And let me know how you might have worked with this concept of like exiting out of and shrinking the fuck it cycle. I hope it was helpful. Okay. Let me know how you do with it. I'd love to hear from you. Stay focused and so long. Hey, if this episode resonated for you, then let's connect. Visit hbeardsley.com/subscribe. That's HBEARDSLEY.com/subscribe and get on the list. You'll get a free gift, periodic coaching, plus advance notice of in-person events and workshops.